Captain Jake Miller felt his stomach drop as he piloted his cargo ship through the atmosphere of Zirian Prime. The planet looked nothing like the trading reports described, where massive cities should sparkle across the desert landscape. He saw only empty shells of buildings reaching toward the burnt orange sky. His ship touched down on a landing pad covered in thick dust. The spaceport that should have been buzzing with activity was eerily quiet. A few alien figures moved slowly between the abandoned cargo containers, their movements sluggish and tired. Jake had been coming to this planet for 3 years, and he had never seen it like this. The Kethali aliens who lived here were famous across the galaxy for their incredible engineering skills. They had built cities that could survive in the harshest desert conditions. Their technology was so advanced that other species would travel across star systems just to see their moisture collection systems and underground cooling networks. These weren't primitive beings. They were masters of desert survival who had turned a wasteland into a thriving civilization. But now, as Jake stepped off his ship, the first thing that hit him was the smell. The air was dry and dusty, carrying the scent of decay and abandonment. The massive moisture collectors that usually hum with activity stood completely still. Their metal surfaces were covered in sand, and many showed signs of damage that hadn't been repaired. Jake walked through what used to be the main trading district. Shops that once sold exotic goods from across their world were boarded up. The beautiful fountains that had been the pride of Kethali engineering were dry and cracked. Sand had blown into corners and piled up against buildings that nobody bothered to clean anymore. A figure approached him slowly. It was Elder Corveth, one of the Kethali leaders Jake had traded with before. But the alien looked nothing like Jake remembered. Corveth's usually bright blue skin had faded to a dull gray. His 4 arms hung weakly at his sides, and his large eyes seemed sunken and tired. Human Trader Jake. Corveth's voice came through his translation device, but even the machine couldn't hide how weak he sounded. You should not have come here. We have nothing left to offer you. Jake looked around at the empty streets. What happened here? 3 months ago, this place was alive. Your people were building new districts, expanding the water networks. Corveth's shoulders sagged. The great drought came faster than our scientists predicted. Our ancient springs, the ones that fed our people for over 2,000 years, began to fail one by one. We thought our technology could save us. We built bigger collectors, dug deeper into the old wells, tried everything our engineers could think of. The alien gestured toward the silent machinery. Nothing worked. The underground rivers that our ancestors found have dried up completely. Our atmosphere processors can pull some moisture from the air, but not nearly enough for a population of millions. Jake followed Corveth through the empty streets. They passed entire city blocks where not a single light shone in the windows. Where is everyone? Dead or gone, Corveth replied simply. Whole families packed up and left for the outer settlements, hoping to find water there. But those places are failing too. The drought has spread across our entire world. We estimate that we have lost 60% of our population in the last 4 months. They stopped in front of what used to be a beautiful park. The trees were now just dried sticks poking up from cracked earth. A playground sat empty, its equipment covered in dust. Our children used to play here, Corveth said quietly. The sound of their laughter mixed with the bubbling of water from the springs below. Now there's only silence. Jake knelt down and touched the ground. It was hard as stone, with deep cracks running through it. There has to be something we can do, some way to find water. Corveth made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. Human, we are the Kethali. We have mastered desert survival for millennia. If our greatest engineers and scientists cannot solve this problem, what could possibly help us now? As they walked back toward Jake's ship, the human trader couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be an answer somewhere. The proud civilization that had welcomed him as a trading partner was dying, and everyone seemed to have given up hope. How long do you think your people have? Jake asked. Elder Corveth looked up at the darkening sky. Perhaps 6 months. Maybe less. We are rationing the last of our stored water, but it will not last long. Jake spent the next 3 days walking around the edges of the dying settlements, ignoring the strange looks from the few Kethali who were still moving about. while their best scientists held emergency meetings in their gleaming council chambers, debating whether to build massive orbital platforms to collect water from space or create even more powerful atmospheric processors. Jake was crawling around on his hands and knees in the dirt. He wasn't looking for anything fancy or high-tech. Instead, he was remembering summer afternoons when he was 12 years old, following his grandfather Tom around the dusty fields of Oklahoma. The old man had been drilling water wells since he was 16, and he had taught Jake things that no computer or fancy scanner could ever figure out. "Look at the land, boy," his grandfather used to say, pointing at seemingly empty ground. "The earth tells you stories if you know how to listen. See how that grass grows a little greener over there? See how the ground dips just slightly in this direction? That's water calling to you from deep down below." Now, walking across the alien landscape of Zirian Prime, Jake found himself seeing the same signs his grandfather had taught him to recognize. The way certain rocks were worn smooth in patterns that suggested ancient water flow. The slight discoloration in the soil that might mean moisture had passed through long ago. Small changes in the elevation that could indicate underground rivers that had moved much deeper over thousands of years. The Kethali had incredibly advanced technology. Their scanners could detect metal deposits miles underground and map the molecular structure of rocks from orbit, but they were looking for the same kind of water sources their ancestors had always used, the shallow springs and underground streams that had fed their civilization for centuries. Jake was looking for something different. His grandfather had always said that when the easy water runs out, you have to think bigger and dig deeper. The earth keeps secrets, Jake. Water that's been hiding down there since before your great-great-grandfather was born. You just have to be willing to work harder than the next fellow to get to it. After 3 days of exploring, Jake was convinced he had found what he was looking for. About 2 miles from the main settlement, the ground showed all the signs his grandfather had taught him to recognize. The rock formation suggested that a massive underground river system had once flowed through this area, much deeper than anything the Kethali had ever tried to reach. He requested a meeting with the Engineering Council, the group of Kethali experts who were trying desperately to save their people. The council chamber was impressive, with holographic displays showing complex atmospheric models and orbital construction plans. A dozen of the alien engineers sat around a curved table, their forearms moving rapidly as they manipulated three-dimensional projections of their proposed solutions. Jake waited patiently as they explained their latest plan to build floating water collectors in the upper atmosphere. When they finished, he cleared his throat. "I think you're making this too complicated," he said simply. "The water you need is right here, under your feet. You just need to dig deeper than you've ever tried before." The room fell silent. Chief Engineer Velkin, a tall Kethali with deep purple skin and silver markings that indicated his high status, stared at Jake for a long moment. Then he gestured dismissively with all four of his arms. "Impossible, human. Our geological surveys have mapped every underground water source on this continent. Our deep scanning technology can penetrate 5 miles into the planet's crust. If there was water down there, we would have found it centuries ago." Jake pulled out a simple paper map he had drawn by hand, showing the area he had been studying. "Your scanners are looking for the wrong things. You're looking for the kind of water sources your people have always used. But there's another layer much deeper. Your ancestors never needed to look that far down, so your technology wasn't built to find it." Another engineer, a female named Thyra, examined Jake's crude drawings with obvious skepticism. "Human, with respect, your species has only recently developed space travel. Our civilization has been masters of desert survival for thousands of years. What could you possibly know about finding water that we do not?" Jake thought about his grandfather's weathered hands and the dozens of successful wells the old man had drilled in places where everyone said there was no water to be found. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty and trust what the ground is telling you, instead of trusting what a computer thinks it sees. The meeting ended with polite but firm rejection of Jake's idea. As the engineers filed out, discussing orbital construction schedules and atmospheric processing quotas, Elder Corveth remained behind. He approached Jake slowly, his tired eyes filled with something that might have been desperate hope. "Show me," he whispered, glancing around to make sure none of the other council members were listening. "My people are dying, human Jake. If there is even the smallest chance you are right, I must know." Jake knew he couldn't use any of the Catholi's fancy drilling equipment without their official permission, and the Engineering Council had made it clear they thought his idea was worthless. So he did what humans had always done when faced with a problem. He got creative with whatever he had on hand. His cargo ship wasn't built for drilling wells, but it did have some heavy-duty mining equipment that he used for extracting valuable minerals on remote planets. There was a plasma cutter that could slice through solid rock, a hydraulic hammer that could break up tuff or deposits, and most importantly, a winch system strong enough to lift several tons of material. Jake spent an entire day taking apart his mining gear and figuring out how to turn it into a drilling rig. He welded together metal pipes from his cargo hold to make a drill shaft. He rigged the hydraulic hammer to work as a percussion drill, the same kind his grandfather had used back on Earth, just powered by his ship's reactor instead of a diesel engine. The hardest part was creating a way to pull the drilling equipment back up once he got deep enough. Jake ended up using his ship's loading crane, anchoring it to the rocky ground with metal stakes, and hoping the whole setup wouldn't collapse under the strain. Word spread quickly through the settlement that the crazy human trader was building some kind of contraption near the old water temple grounds. At first, only a few curious Cathali came to watch. They stood at a respectful distance, whispering among themselves about what the strange alien was trying to do. By the second day, the crowd had grown larger. Families brought their children to see the spectacle. Some of the younger Cathali engineers showed up, though they tried to pretend they were just passing by. Even some of the council members arrived, shaking their heads but unable to look away from Jake's bizarre construction project. The drilling itself was backbreaking work. Jake's improvised rig was loud, clunky, and seemed to break down every few hours. Unlike the smooth, computerized drilling systems the Cathali were used to, this machine shook and rattled and threw sparks. Jake had to manually guide the drill, feeling his way through different layers of rock and soil by the vibrations that traveled up the metal pipes. "This is madness," Chief Engineer Velkin announced to anyone who would listen. "Look at this primitive approach. No geological mapping, no computer guidance, no analysis of soil composition. He is simply hammering metal into ground and hoping for the best." But Jake wasn't hoping. He was listening. Every change in the sound of the drill told him something about what lay beneath. When the hammering became easier, it meant he had hit a softer layer. When it got harder, he was going through solid rock. His grandfather had taught him to feel the difference between hitting water-bearing rock and dry stone, and Jake trusted those old lessons more than any computer readout. The work was exhausting under Zirian Prime's brutal sun. Jake's human physiology wasn't designed for the desert heat, and he had to take frequent breaks to avoid heat stroke. Several young Cathali volunteers stepped forward to help, fascinated despite themselves by the hands-on approach to problem-solving. Thyra, one of the engineers who had dismissed Jake's plan in the council meeting, found herself drawn back to the drilling site day after day. "I do not understand," she admitted to Elder Corveth. "His methods are so crude, so unscientific. Yet there is something about the way he works. He seems to know things about the ground that our instruments cannot detect." By the third day, Jake had drilled deeper than any Cathali well in the settlement's history. The crowd watching had grown to several hundred aliens, many of them bringing food and water for the human, who was working so hard on their behalf. Children drew pictures of Jake's strange machine, and elders told stories about the ancient days when their own ancestors had dug wells by hand. Some of the watchers were starting to lose faith. The drill had been pounding away for 3 full days with no sign of success. Jake himself was beginning to worry that maybe the Cathali engineers were right. Maybe his grandfather's techniques wouldn't work on an alien world with different geology and different rules. But on the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. Jake was guiding the drill through what felt like the hardest layer of rock, yet when suddenly the resistance vanished, the drill dropped almost 2 feet in an instant, and Jake heard a sound that made his heart race, the distant splash of water far below. Within seconds, pressure began building in the drill shaft. Jake barely had time to shout a warning before water exploded up the pipe like a geyser, shooting 30 feet into the air and soaking everyone in the crowd. The Kethali stood frozen in shock for a moment, watching more water than their settlement had seen in months pouring out of the ground. Then Elder Corvette stepped forward, cupped the clean, cold water in his 4 hands, and began to weep. The news of Jake's successful well spread across Zirian Prime faster than anyone expected. Within hours of the water erupting from the ground, messages were flying between settlements through the planet's communication networks. Aliens who hadn't spoken to each other in months, too focused on their own survival, suddenly had something to talk about again. The first desperate call came from New Corinth, a settlement 300 miles to the north. Their leader, an elderly Kethali named Zephin, appeared on Jake's communication screen with tears streaming down his face. "Human Jake, we heard what you did for Corvetta's people. Our children are dying. Our last water reserves will be gone in 2 weeks. Please, we will give you anything we have left." More calls followed. Rocky Haven, Iron Ridge, Crystal Valley, settlements that Jake had never even heard of were begging for his help. Each story was the same. Proud communities reduced to rationing drops of water, families fleeing to other planets, entire districts abandoned as people gave up hope. Jake realized he was facing a problem much bigger than he had imagined. Even working day and night, he couldn't possibly drill wells for every settlement on the planet by himself. He needed help, and he needed to think like a businessman rather than just a helpful trader. That's when he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to save every community personally, Jake decided to teach the Kethali how to save themselves. He would show them the human way of finding deep water, and they could use their own advanced technology to make the process even better. Elder Corvette was the first to volunteer. Despite being over 300 years old by human standards, he insisted on learning every detail of Jake's drilling techniques. "I want to understand how human thinking works," the old alien explained. "Your people see things differently than we do." Jake started with the basics his grandfather had taught him: how to read the land for signs of underground water, how to feel the difference between different types of rock through the vibrations of the drill, how to know when you're getting close to water by the way the soil changes color and texture. The Kethali students were fascinated by these simple observation methods. Thyra, the engineer who had been skeptical at first, became one of Jake's most eager pupils. "We have been so focused on complex scanning technology that we forgot to use our natural senses," she admitted. "Your grandfather's techniques are not primitive. They are foundational knowledge that we never learned." Within a month, Jake had trained the first group of Kethali well drillers. But he quickly realized they could do much better than simply copying human methods. The aliens had access to materials and technology that could make the drilling process faster and more reliable. They developed metal alloys for drill bits that could cut through rock twice as fast as Jake's improvised equipment. They created portable fusion generators that could power drilling rigs without needing a spacecraft's reactor. Most importantly, they combined Jake's intuitive techniques with their own geological knowledge to create maps showing the most promising drilling sites across the planet. Jake officially registered Desert Wells Company with the Galactic Trade Commission, making himself and his Kethali partners legitimate business operators. The name was Corvetta's idea, simple, direct, and promising exactly what desperate communities needed most. As word of their success spread, Jake realized he needed help from other humans who understood water systems better than a cargo ship captain. He sent a message back to Earth, looking for experts who might be willing to join an alien water drilling operation. The response came from Rebecca Hayes, a hydrogeologist who had spent 20 years drilling wells in some of Earth's most challenging environments. She had worked in the Sahara Desert, the Australian outback, and the dry regions of Chile. When she heard about Jake's project, she immediately booked passage on the next ship to Zirian Prime. Rebecca brought knowledge that neither Jake nor the Kethali possessed. She understood how to create distribution systems that could carry water efficiently across long distances. She knew how to build storage tanks that would keep water clean and fresh. Most importantly, she understood how to manage water resources so that communities wouldn't drain their new wells too quickly. Together, the human-alien team created something neither species could have achieved alone. Jake's practical drilling knowledge, combined with Kethali engineering skills and Rebecca's expertise in water management, produced results that amazed everyone involved. Within 6 months, Desert Wells Company had drilled successful wells for over 50 settlements. The Kethali, who'd been embarrassed about needing help from primitive humans, began to see the situation differently. They realized that human survival instincts, developed over millions of years on a harsh planet, were actually advanced knowledge that their own comfortable civilization had never needed to develop. The partnership became a source of pride rather than shame. Kethali engineers started incorporating human problem-solving methods into other projects. They began to appreciate the value of simple, direct solutions over complex technological approaches. Jake found himself running a thriving business that employed hundreds of workers from both species. What started as one human trying to help a dying alien settlement had become a planet-wide operation that was bringing life back to Zirian Prime. The invitation to address the Galactic Trade Council came exactly 1 year after Jake had first landed on the dying world of Zirian Prime. As he stood in the massive assembly hall on the neutral station of Harmony Point, looking out at representatives from over 200 different alien civilizations, Jake couldn't help but think about how much had changed. The council chamber was an impressive sight. Beings from across the galaxy filled the curved rows of seats, some breathing oxygen like humans, others in environmental suits, and a few existing as pure energy contained in special holding fields. They had all come to hear about humanity's unexpected success in solving problems that had stumped civilizations far older and more technologically advanced than Earth. Jake wasn't alone on the speaking platform. Elder Corvesta beside him, no longer the desperate, dying alien Jake had first met in that empty spaceport. The old Kethali looked healthy and strong, his blue skin bright with renewed vitality. His people's settlements were thriving again, their population growing as families returned from exile to rebuild their communities around the new wells. But the real reason they were all here was a flood of requests that had poured in from across the galaxy. Word of Desert Wells Company's success had traveled far beyond Zirian Prime, reaching worlds that were facing their own impossible water shortages. The first call had come from the Vexery system, where 3 different planets were experiencing the worst drought in their recorded history. Their environmental engineers had tried everything: cloud seeding, atmospheric processing, even moving ice asteroids from the outer reaches of their solar system. Nothing had worked, and millions of beings were facing starvation as their agricultural systems collapsed. Then came requests from the Crystalline Confederation, whose silicon-based beings needed specialized mineral water that their traditional extraction methods could no longer provide. The nomadic fleet of Andrus wanted help finding water sources on planets where they could establish temporary colonies. Even the technologically superior hegemony of Proxima had quietly inquired about human drilling techniques after their own automated systems failed on a newly colonized world. Each species had the same story. Their advanced technology, perfectly designed for normal conditions, couldn't adapt to extreme situations. When their sophisticated systems failed, they had no backup plan. They had never learned the basic survival skills that humanity had developed through millions of years of struggling against a hostile environment. Jake began his presentation by telling the assembly about his grandfather Tom, the Oklahoma well driller who had taught a young boy to listen to the earth and trust his instincts. Many of the alien representatives seemed puzzled by this approach. Their civilizations had developed beyond the need for such primitive knowledge, or so they thought. The problem, Jake explained, isn't that your technology is bad. It's incredibly advanced, far beyond anything we humans have ever built. The problem is that you've forgotten how to think like survivors. When your computers can't find water, you assume there isn't any. When your scanners show empty ground, you give up and look somewhere else. He showed them footage of the drilling operation on Zirian Prime, the crude, improvised rig that looked like something from humanity's industrial past, operated by intuition and experience rather than computer guidance. To many of the watching aliens, it must have looked absurdly primitive. This is what humans do when the easy solutions don't work. Jay continued, "We get our hands dirty. We try harder. We refuse to accept that a problem has no solution just because the obvious answers have failed." Rebecca Hayes took over the technical portion of the presentation, explaining how human survival instincts could be combined with alien technology to create hybrid systems that were both sophisticated and adaptable. She showed designs for drilling equipment that used Cathali materials but incorporated human techniques for reading geological formations by feel and sound. The questions that followed revealed just how different human thinking was from most galactic civilizations. A representative from the academic worlds asked why humans would waste time on inefficient manual observation when sensors could provide precise measurements. A delegate from the Efficiency Collector wanted to know why Desert Wells Company didn't simply mass-produce automated drilling systems instead of training individual workers. Jake realized that most of these species had never faced the kind of desperate situations that had shaped human evolution. They had developed comfortable, stable civilizations that rarely required improvisation or creative problem-solving. When extreme situations arose, they were intellectually equipped to analyze the problems, but not emotionally prepared to fight through them. Elder Corveth spoke next, describing how the partnership with humans had changed Cathali thinking. "We learned that true intelligence isn't just about having better technology," the old alien said. "It's about refusing to quit when your technology fails. It's about finding new ways to approach old problems." By the end of the presentation, Desert Wells Company had received preliminary contracts from 17 different worlds. Some wanted immediate emergency drilling operations. Others were interested in long-term partnerships to develop hybrid human-alien survival technologies. As Jake signed the agreements, surrounded by alien dignitaries who months earlier would never have considered asking humans for help, he thought about his grandfather's simple wisdom. The old man had never imagined that his well-drilling techniques would one day save civilizations across the galaxy, but he had understood something that more advanced species had forgotten. Sometimes the old ways really do work best. And sometimes, when everything else fails, the answer is simply to dig deeper and never give up.